This is Just Women, every Tuesday at 1 o'clock on Brooklands Radio.
Well, hello there and welcome to Just Women, the weekly talk show on Brooklands Radio. And it's Just Women for the next hour, talking to very interesting, extremely intriguing and inspiring women. I'm Alison Florence and the co-presenter with me today is Nikki Rudd. Hello, Nikki.
Hi.
To start the programme today, under the kids section, I'd like to welcome Kit Oliver. Welcome to you today, Kit.
Thank you.
Now, I know that you did your first charity work when you were just 14 years old.
Yes, yeah.
Was it this experience which stayed with you all your life and gave you the desire to work in this sector for so many years?
I don't think it was as clear as that to me, that I set aside voluntary work from any other work. It was just something in my family. My mother always said, you're very lucky, you've got your health, your father's come back from the war, he's alive. And I started by helping an orphanage and went on from there, right through university and right through my life. I've loved it.
So you've done a load of different work then, in supporting different people in different types of settings, have you? Apart from the orphanage, what else have you done?
I've worked a lot. Well, for example, when my children were young, and I had the usual time that a young mother has, I drove an ambulance for a while as a volunteer, going around picking people up from their home. And I must say, the ambulance was not quite as well looked after, probably, as they are today. And we had a lot of fun when we broke down.
So they didn't have health and safety so much in those days as they did these days?
No.
Then?
As long as I got the wheelchairs anchored to the floor of the ambulance, I thought that was pretty good.
I mean, even in those days, just a woman driving an ambulance must have been quite different, mustn't it?
Maybe. I didn't think about it. No. You know, I've never thought gender.
No, well, that's good, isn't it? No. Well, when you initially decided to set up a helpline for parents in Surrey, it was back in the 90s, wasn't it? So what made you decide that you wanted to do this particularly?
For many years, I've been aware of people's loneliness. I lived in London for a lot of years, came out to Surrey about 30 years ago, I suppose, and this has remained with me. The lonely bed sit, the young person coming home from work, the elderly person alone in their house. And I was also aware that people have problems which they're not necessarily going to want to share with their immediate family, and they'd rather talk to somebody who wasn't close. And I thought, nearly everybody's got access to a telephone. If I could arrange something like that, a telephone helpline, it would have to be confidential. In my mind, nobody need give their name, nobody need give their address. Just bring what they wanted to talk about. We'd have trained volunteers, and I set off from there, actually.
So are you saying that you were one of those people initially who was quite lonely and could have done with someone to talk to?
No, I'm not really. I'm not really saying that, if I'm honest. I certainly had problems, who doesn't? But I had people I could talk to. But I was aware, through voluntary work, I guess, that there are many, many people who don't. And it was really to reach out to those people that I thought a helpline might help.
Because I think in London it's probably renowned for being quite a lonely place, isn't it? With, lots of people sort of cooped up in flats and never knowing each other's neighbours and things. When you moved to Surrey, did you find it was better than you thought London was, or was Surrey quite a lonely place too?
Surrey can be quite a lonely place as well. Some of the ideas about Surrey as this idyllic, well-off area don't go right throughout Surrey. There is a lot of loneliness. There's a lot of a commuter population who don't actually find it easy to get to know those who live around them. There are also people who move on quickly, may stay in Surrey for 6 years, then the jobs move elsewhere, and so do they. But also, there are many people in Surrey who are not very well off and don't necessarily have the wherewithal financially to go here, go there. They are tied to where they live and often struggle.
I think one of the things I found, because I'm Surrey, sort of born and bred, but I did live in the Midlands for a long time, and there people tend to stay within a very close radius of their family. They don't tend to move out, they don't commute. And when I moved down here, it made me realise just how much people are lonely because their parents might live a long way away, their friends, they leave the house very early in the morning to go up to London and things, and you really don't get to know people as well, do you?
You're absolutely right, Alison, spot on.
So how did you start from scratch on a project like this?
Had talk, will travel, more or less. Suddenly, I think, I must have been about 59, I think, and I was working still. I worked till I was 73, and I enjoyed my work very much. But, you know, the children had grown up, they were elsewhere, and I felt I had a bit more time. And I'd just been elected to a local district council, so I was aware more of social services, the police, that sort of thing. I listened carefully, and I thought, yes, where I am, which was Mole Valley, this is just the place to set up this telephone helpline. So I started talking, and people nodded their heads wisely and said, yes, yes, and nothing else. So then I just took the opportunity to talk about it wherever I was. And I happened to be working on a voluntary basis in the area of youth and crime. And there was a meeting, and at the meeting were some pretty sort of active people from police, social services, goodness knows what. And I raised this idea. Everybody nodded, and that was that. But when I came home, I had a phone call from a wonderful lady who was the director of the Safer Surrey Partnership. So that's Surrey County Council. And that partnership was 3 groups of community supportive people, social services, police and fire. She was the director. She said to me, I liked your idea. Now, if you would set it up across Surrey, not just Mole Valley, I'll support you with secretarial. She also said, I want you to do it within 1 year.
No pressure then.
So, you know, just sort of holding my breath, I managed to say, oh yes, lovely. And we started from there, actually.
So which was the hardest part? Was it getting volunteers or getting funding?
Funding, of course, was very hard. I must say Surrey County Council have been magnificent. We are now 20 years old as a charity next July, and they've been a core funder all that time. They've been terrific. I must say that right throughout that time of trying to set it up and since, I'm struck by the goodwill I meet. Totally struck by it. How willing people are to help and how they want to help. So fundraising is difficult. It's no easier for us than for any other charity. We've had help from Surrey businesses. I hope they understand it is their helpline. It is Surrey's helpline. So a business which has employees who have problems which they don't want known at work can ring us. We're a confidential telephone helpline. Nobody asks your name or where you live or anything. And I think a lot of businesses understand that. And then there are individuals in Surrey, and whether it's a small donation or a larger one, it's there. So yes, we do struggle with fundraising, but there is a lot of goodwill.
And how much do you think you actually need over the course of the year to keep Family Line going?
I may be talking out of the top of my head, but I would say about 50,000. But you'd have to really get the proper figure by talking to somebody who now is working at Family Line. I'm not working there anymore.
No. What does it actually go towards in 50,000? Is that training the volunteers or paying for the phone calls?
We have one post one post, and that post is a shared one. So we have 2 part-time paid people. The rest is all done by volunteers, absolutely everything. Yes, the helpline is free, and of course that really does cost. I think we had something like 25,000 odd minutes of calls taken last year. So, yes, all those calls have to be paid for by us.
And that's very encouraging for people, because it might have put them off if they'd known that if they were on the phone for half an hour or something, it was going to cost them a vast amount of money, because that's very important, especially, as you said earlier, a lot of them are worried because of unemployment.
Oh, exactly, yes. Yeah.
And what sort of topics are people sort of ringing in and asking for advice on? And has that changed over the last 20 years, do you think, or is it still sort of some core issues?
I think there are core issues, and it's really anything. We get calls about abuse, we get calls about relationships, bereavement, people's children, worries about their children, worries about elderly parents. We get calls about divorce, separation, alcohol, drugs, loneliness, of course, mental health things, and more we're getting teenage calls, which I'm terribly pleased about, because we shouldn't just be seen as for one age group. So there are the calls from the teenagers, student worries, health worries, bullying, school problems with bullying. And I was very interested with the launch of Silverline recently, Esther Ransom's thing, because, again, we are there for the elderly community. And with other work that I do, I'm very, very conscious of the old person sitting behind the curtains, longing for somebody to come up the path.
Yeah, it's a really big issue, isn't it, now? They're actually sort of trying to raise it, particularly with that sort of families not being nearby.
Oh, yes, absolutely, yeah.
So you're getting, obviously, sort of older people and young people. Do you have a sort of split with sort of male or female, do you think, or...?
We get both. No, I think that either who call us will produce,
Yeah. And how do you... I mean, that's an awful lot of topics to sort of be able to sort of cover off.
Yeah.
So the people who volunteer, who are the people who take the call, I'm presuming they go through sort of a training programme, and do they have certain calls that once somebody calls in, you have that conversation with that person, or do they try and sort of transfer you through to somebody who perhaps has got experience of a particular field, depending on what the issue is?
No, the caller gets through to a volunteer. All the volunteers are trained. The training is good. We put together a wonderful training manual, again with the help of Surrey County Council. There was a really nationwide experienced educational psychologist there, and she helped. She directed the training. The training is reflective listening, so it's a type of beginning of counselling, though you're not giving advice on the phone, but you are able to draw from the person their own views of the problem they have. And it's amazing when the caller calls and they are even just speaking to somebody else about the problem, they're listening to themselves speaking. And thoughts about how to deal with it come up in their own minds. And because the volunteers are trained in the way of asking a question, so that the person's thoughts can be developed by themselves, not by the volunteer, I've had callers actually ring us back and say, "You have no idea how that helped me. I didn't honestly realise." Just sharing that with somebody who's not going to judge me, what a difference it's made to me.
Yeah, and I think the judging thing, as you say, it's finding somebody who perhaps is a bit distant from that situation, who can just be, can ask questions, the right questions, so that somebody feels that they can be completely honest and completely open about it.
And also you've got all the time in the world. It's not that volunteer is suddenly going to say, oh gosh, I've got to rush off and do the shopping or pick up the children or whatever. No, they're there for as long as you need them.
So do they work in a sort of a shift pattern, or that they just be there for so many hours, or
they have
how does
their
that work?
own time each week? Each volunteer comes in on a certain day at a certain time. The line is open from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and if I could just give the number.
Yes, sure.
It's 0808 800 5678.
What's snappy? We'll get that at the end as well, don't worry.
What sort of training would a volunteer be expected to do?
Well, they would need to commit themselves to coming for several weeks for this training. And I have heard from volunteers how valuable it's been. And one of the things I've really been very proud about is that a number of our volunteers, because of the training they've been given, have gone on to do further study. I remember a lady in particular, about, 14 years ago. She was in her 50s, I guess. Her children had grown up. She came and trained with us. She went on to do a degree in psychology, and she's now working in that field. And I thought that was really rather wonderful. I remember interviewing her. The volunteer has to be interviewed just to see that, it's right for them, talk about it, that it's right. Then they receive the training. And I guess one of the things that is very important, when they receive a call and when they put down the phone after, who did the most talking? Shouldn't be the volunteer, should be the caller.
They are there to listen.
They're there to listen. At the end of their shift, there is support for them, so that they may have taken a very difficult call, which can shake you up a bit. And they need somebody there with whom they can unload, so that they go home and they don't unload on their family.
What sort of backgrounds do the volunteers tend to come from? Is it very general?
Oh, very general. And we have men and women. We have a lovely man who's just recently had a profile written of him in a local Surrey paper. And he's interesting because he's called Bertie Newton. And he was a pilot, RAF pilot. Early 50s, he had a stroke. And it meant he couldn't continue. Now, he had discovered during his career that he had a talent for mentoring younger pilots. And he had to leave the RAF eventually. And when he did, he was looking for some voluntary work where he could use these skills. And he saw Family Line. Hooray! Oh. So Bertie is on the line at Family Line, and that's sort of one little profile of a volunteer. But many of the volunteers are parents, and like you say, they'll come from a number of different backgrounds.
So when they come for an interview, is there any reason why you would have to turn them down? Or is that quite unusual for you to turn someone down who wants to be a volunteer?
I think it's unusual. It would only be if something was very, very striking. And then you discussed with them whether we were the right charity to use their talents.
So you have to be quite tactful, don't you, when someone's volunteering their time, to just say, we don't want you?
Tactful and loving.
Yeah, definitely. And the training, you say it's several weeks. Is that just one day a week or one evening a week? How long would they be expected to commit to?
Well, I don't know exactly now, so I'd better be careful. But I would have said it was one evening a week. Or, if you work, it would have to be evening. So
it doesn't actually make you not able to volunteer when you're a worker, then? It doesn't necessarily
No. I've been a worker all the time I was with Family Line.
And what about, you say there is support if someone's had a distressing call. What would happen if someone had a call and they were really worried about that caller, maybe committing suicide or doing something that obviously they would regret? What sort of support would they have there, and would they be encouraged to ring someone?
I think the people who support our volunteers are well able to do the support. If there is that sort of call, I've been there when there has been, not that, but other things which are very serious. I have been amazed at how the volunteers persist and manage to get through to the caller. I'm amazed at their skill. Really am.
Because there must be some things that they might share with you that you really don't approve of. They might sort of share that they've been involved in child abuse or anything, wouldn't they?
Exactly.
And you wouldn't really know what to do, would you?
Well, we have had success in encouraging that caller to go and seek help. Because they've called us back. We only know, you see, we have no means of identifying the person, because we only know when they call us back and say, I did what I thought I ought to do.
Yeah. So if someone wants to be a volunteer who's listening to the programme today, how would they go about that, Kit?
Well, if they ring our admin line, which is 01372 841 125, then they can talk about volunteering with somebody in the office there. And they're most welcome.
Yeah, sure. And also, if somebody who's listening belongs to a company who would like to raise funds for you, how would they find out about that?
Ring the same number, 01372 841 125, and that can be talked over with pleasure.
Good. And the other number you were going to share with us again was the number if people wanted to ring.
It's the helpline, which is 0808 800 5678. You can also look on our website, Family Line Surrey. We're also getting more emails these days. The email is help@familyline.org.uk. If there's nobody there immediately, you will be answered very quickly, within a day. Personally, I think it's much more instant if you use the free phone.
Right. A few sort of philosophies on what to do if you've really got ambition to do things. And as you say, you were sort of really thinking of retirement almost when you set up Family Line, or you could have been, but you didn't. So how would you recommend to people that they would go about doing something like you did?
Well, this is me looking back with hindsight, isn't it, really?
Yes.
At the time, I had none of these wonderful thoughts. But looking back with hindsight, I came across a quote from Goethe. Now, I know nothing about Goethe, really, but it just fitted how I feel. So, whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. And I thought, spot on. The other thing, when you're setting something up, you'll meet loads of people, and you'll have to learn how to assess, how to trust, how to acknowledge that you have questions about that person. And my advice, and it's my advice to my grown-up children as well, is trust your gut. If your gut says, this is a person I can trust, then do so. If your gut says, there's something here, then listen. And the last thing I would say, one can get terribly driven when you've got an idea which is burning inside and you want to do it and you've got a second idea and then something's gone wrong and you think, oh, and my feeling is then, stop, look around you. Take time to smell the flowers. Very, very important that you realise you're not a machine. And whatever's crushing in on you about your idea or anything else, give yourself that stop time. Give yourself that smell the flowers time.
Brilliant. That's really interesting, and thanks so much for sharing all these things that you shared with us today, Kit, and good luck with everything that you do. I'm sure you've got lots of other things on your agenda, haven't you? We'll have to have you back in just a minute to talk about them again. But thanks again for coming into the programme.
You're listening to Just Women on Brooklands Radio. You can join in by emailing any comments or questions you may have to justwomen@brooklandsradio.co.uk, or check us out on Facebook. Search for Just Women at Brooklands Radio. Just Women is just what you need.